Hello and welcome. You're watching this special series in the run-up to Budget 2017 in collaboration with Business World. NewsX presents to you this series of programs. Today we're going to be focusing on what the government is focusing on. This budget is expected to be high on a push on jobs. Job creation is the name of the game. In 2017-18, India will need more jobs. Today on the panel, I have Upadhyaya, Head Advisory and Knowledge Society Human Resource Management. Thank you for joining us. Also with us from the National Skill Development Corporation is Jayant Krishna. He's the Executive Director and Chief Operating Officer. Thank you for joining us as well. Nilanjan Roy joins us. He's the Head of Strategy Times Business Group. Business Solutions, I beg your pardon. Thank you for being with us. And completing the panel will be Suman Jha, Deputy Editor of Business World Magazine. Thank you, Suman, for being with us. Let me start with you, Jayant, if I could. Jobless growth is a tag that this government desperately needs to shed, wants to shed. How exactly does a government go about when the government does claim that, yes, there has been so many achievements in the past year as well, but there's one tag of jobless growth is not just this government, any government would want to shed. How does the budget then come into it? Do you see a big push towards creating jobs in this budget?
Yeah, let me clarify. It's not that the new jobs are not getting created, but they're not in the same proportion of incremental GDP that's getting added to the country. If you look at the service sector jobs, they are still happening. Manufacturing sector, yes, there's a problem because the way robotics has become important. I mean, most of this growth that is happening in the manufacturing sector is not labor intensive; it's capital intensive. So therefore, the incremental jobs that are coming up for every 1,000 crore worth of investment, they're not as many. But let's understand a deeper problem. See, today we say that the size of our labor force is of an order of 47 to 50 crore people. I mean, kind of thing. But and a very large percentage of these jobs, almost 90% of it, actually is not in the organized and formal sector. They come from unorganized and informal sector. So I think the entire focus of we as a country has to be that how do we transition jobs from informal and unorganized sector to formal and organized sector.
Do you agree with that, it's not necessarily jobless growth that we're witnessing? Do you agree with that?
In some ways, yes. And the story is kind of a mixed bag across sectors, right? While recent developments have actually led to a situation where, new sectors are getting a fillip in terms of getting job creation, what with demonetization happening and, banking and financial services actually hiring, at this point of time, alternate payment method channels are recruiting big time, right? But if you look at it, the biggest job creators, right, as Jayant said, manufacturing and real estate, right? Have been particularly hit with such moves.
There is
right?
definitely a contraction. I mean, there's divided opinion how much contraction,
how bad
how
it is,
long it will last really, but
sure.
There is definitely a contraction in the short term, and that affects job creation as well.
True. While I agree that the longer term, it's looking bright, right? There are a number of policy incentives that the government is looking to provide to increase job creation. For example, the recent move on increasing credit for MSMEs is going to have a positive intake on jobs down the line, right? However, a few recent moves has led to a situation where the current situation on jobs is not that bright, right? You do need a few longer term things in place. So for example, putting in place great skills, which I'm sure NSDC is kind of doing a lot of things around it, right? Having those skills framework in place, and also making sure that you have the right people in the right sort of sectors is going to be crucial. IT and automation is going to
I'm just going to throw a couple of figures out there, and this is for you, if I could, Nilanjan. 100 million jobs by 2022 is what the government promised when it came. Is it really on track? Do you see it really happening? Because I have one more figure that I want to quote to you, which I believe is 1.3 lakh jobs have been created in 2015. Well, that's just a minuscule portion of what we need to be doing.
Sure. So yeah, see, when these figures are actually thrown up, it's always a top-down figure rather than a bottom-up figure. But more fundamentally, we'll actually have to look at the macroeconomic scenario globally. See, Indian service sector growth happened on the base of our software jobs, and which was globally, and those grew on the base of industrialized economies absorbing. Now, global scenario being the way it is, job creation has to happen internally, and for job creation to happen internally, we don't have the industrial base to even create the service sector jobs. So there has to be massive investment in infrastructure, in manufacturing. But for that to happen, there's a fundamental problem. See, if you look at cost of capital in India, cost of capital for any loan is up to about 18%, anyone. So when you're borrowing money, and put the simple maths in place, if you're borrowing money at 18%, your return on investment every year, you have to look at a growth of 30, 40%, putting inside all costs, right? For any industry to support, growth at 30, 40% is very, very difficult, and manufacturing even more difficult. So the fundamental thing is the cost of borrowing needs to come down.
I want to
and
go
that's
back.
a structural change that is required.
I want to go back to the initial problem, if you want to call it a challenge at hand. But first, Suman, your outlook really. 2017 budget, what are the challenges?
I think I'll just go to what Jayant flagged off. He said that probably manufacturing sector has not really taken off in a manner that it should have. So do you think it raises a question mark on the very fundamentals of Make in India in a program that government had launched rather? Now, Make in India was supposed to give a fillip to the manufacturing sector, jobs, etc., but somehow this has not happened. People are talking about automation and all, but somehow industrial revolution has bypassed India, and we are talking about the fourth industrial revolution. So do you think, coming as you do from NSDC, that Make in India program somehow has not delivered the results it should have?
See, Make in India is a long-term program, that this kind of a mission cannot deliver overnight results. But fundamentally, if you look at, we need more investments to happen in the country, both domestic investments, FDI, everything needs to happen. And that would happen if progressively in this budget and even otherwise, we as a nation have to keep on working towards ease of improving business. That's a fundamental to solicit investments, that's very, very important. I know just Government of India cannot do it because a lot of role is to be played by the state governments. But another thing which is very, very important is that our labor laws have to become more liberal. Hiring has to become more flexible and things like that. If these two areas we work on, along with a lot of impetus on infrastructure, roads, ports, and these kind of things, I think I see no reason why we will not.
What about private investment? Why has private investment really dipped in infra, especially? And that's also one of the reasons that the government perhaps should be trying to give.
I don't think private, in the infra sector, private investment has dipped. But what is the rate of growth that people had thought it would see? That has not happened for a variety of reasons, Because this government has embarked upon a lot of ambitious programs. We talked about Make in India, we have Startup India, we have Digital India, we have Skill India, whole lot of things. So, let's also understand that, the nation is going through a major churn. A lot of things that we did not do in several decades, we want to achieve overnight results.
So, I want to shift focus to the budget and upcoming, it's not too far now, and coming back to you, Nilanjan, what are the possible measures that the government should be looking at, could be looking at, in terms of spurring jobs, especially in manufacturing, because that has been lagging for a while? And do you see any specific steps that the finance minister can take, or measures you can announce?
Specifically, apart from, the cost of borrowing, is actually, I totally agree with him. What he said is, the ease of doing business, the number of windows to go to start off our industry. If, we've always talked about a single window clearance. If that can be achieved, I think those are the things. See, Indians inherently are great businessmen. We have great entrepreneurs here. Just the difficulty of starting up a business or conducting business is so difficult here. So if that ease is given with the cost of borrowing, I think I see no reason why. The other point is, I think, we've always focused on skill development in the educated sector. If you look at cost of input into the construction sector, the reason why construction cost has not come down is automation has not come in. And because, the simple construction worker, he does not have the skill training to handle automized equipment. There are automized laser measuring machines, there are laser things. And automation has not come in there. And that's the reason the cost of, construction has not come down.
I want to talk about big ticket reforms or big ticket announcements, if there could be any, and I'm going to come to you in a bit. But first, let me ask you, we had this whole phase when SEZs were the talk of town, the flavor of the month. We have CEZs, coastal economic zones as well. Do you believe that linking incentives for manufacturing units especially announcing perhaps, we expect the finance minister might announce one CEZ at least in this budget as well. Do you believe that going the Shanghai model way, so-called Shanghai model way, could be one particular measure the government could take to perhaps spur some sort of activity?
Why not? I mean, to give this government complete credit, right? Perhaps for the first time with some of its moves, you know, it's been at one step ahead of the industry, right? And, you know, whatever the outcome, the intention is in the right place, right? So hopefully this budget will see something very interesting coming along those lines. However, having said that, you know, two clear things which need to get done, right? One, like Jayant said, you know, you first of all need those investments coming in, right? You know, no jobs are going to get created unless you have, you know, people putting in that FDI, right? And getting that, you know, money to set up industries. The government has taken an ambitious target of being, of making GDP 25%, right? Or manufacturing being 25% of the GDP from the current about 16 odd %, right? You of course do need a host of other policy measures, right, in place to enable that, right?
Could you elaborate on that? What are we talking about? What kind of policy measures? What kind of announcements that you would be looking at as someone who follows the field?
That's the second part, right? How do we get more and more labor, you know, into the organized sector who are currently in the unorganized sector? Yeah. Absolutely. If you look at you know, diversity of employment in India, it's miserable, right? How do we get more and more women into the workplace, right? How do we ensure that, you know, recent changes which have been made in the Maternity Benefit Act, you know, actually are translated into real benefits for people who are working out of their homes, right? Who do not get those benefits because it's only applicable to people in the organized sector, right? So those are the two-pronged approach that, you know, I sincerely believe the government should take. One, figure out how to get in more and more investments. Two, get in more labor into the workplace who are going to get into the organized sector.
Does simplification of a tax code, for example, will that be perhaps one of the drivers that could spur job creation? Or
I think you are bang on. Yeah? That could be one of the drivers, not only for this budget and all, but for the times to come and all. But taking forward the argument that Jayant and Mr. Upadhyaya made, that, you know, we have a situation where ease of doing business has become the mantra for almost all the states, and states are competing against each other to become right at the top of the pyramid. Also, Jayant, as you would have noticed, there's the BJP governments that are doing their best to sort of reform the labor laws. So it's whether Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, etc., and all of them are sort of ranged against each other as far as liberalizing the labor laws are concerned and all. So we are in for interesting times. And this budget could see some forward movement on that. Would you agree with that?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, fundamentally, you know, all the central government, everybody has to understand that good economics makes good politics. I think that's very, very important. And therefore, whatever needs to be done to make labor laws more liberal, allow flexi hiring, I think it needs to be done. I will even go to an extent that if new jobs are not getting created, let's look at the MSME sector, because in the large sector, in the manufacturing space, incremental jobs are very, very few. But MSME sector, which still employs a very, very large workforce, and you know, I think we could perhaps, the government could incentivize more people in MSME sector getting transitioned from informal, unorganized to organized and formal. I will go to an extent that, you know, some incentives like reimbursement of you know, their PF contribution, gratuity contribution and things like that.
What about a National Innovation Fund? I mean, Korea has tried it, Taiwan has tried it. I mean, do you think that could be something the government should be looking at?
Yeah, it could do that. You know, it will bring a lot of creativity, a lot of innovation into the play. Some startups will get a lot of incentives and so on and so forth. But it's not going to be something which is low-hanging fruit. It will deliver results over a number
over time,
of
course. I want to go back to you for a bit here. The agri sector. A large number of our jobs are related to the agricultural sector, and conventional wisdom at least would suggest that post-demonetization that has taken a hit. Contraction is there. I don't know how long it's going to be there. There's a divided opinion on that. Data hasn't come. It's still being collated right now. So we can't be very sure about the numbers. But do you think a push in the agri sector could perhaps alleviate some of the pain? And when I say a push, I mean a massive push.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, agriculture still contributes a significant portion of India's GDP. So a push, you know, even a 1 or 2% growth there contributes on the overall sector, because the reason India's, you know, growth lies at about 6.97, wherever that number is, because the agri sector is growing at about 2 to 3%, but the industrial sector is growing at about 12 to 13%. So even a single digit movement there contributes hugely because of the size of that economy. But again, over there, what is actually required is structural changes. Cost of borrowing, automation, education is completely missing. So you cannot fault this government on a vision. They've set the vision right. But unfortunately, I think what is happening is at the execution level. Let me take a slightly different example. Example I'm familiar with. Everyone's been talking about artificial intelligence. Great benefits to the industry. But where are the people going to come in from? Our colleges lie in completely a different paradigm. They are not contributing. So if we are saying the artificial intelligence is going to contribute this size of growth to the industrial economy, where are the people going to come from? We have to take in steps so that we train those people in artificial intelligence in the colleges itself. So our colleges are, our academics are completely out of sync with what the industry is thinking about or what the government is laying as a vision document. Similar example is also with even agriculture. If that kind of growth and a structural reform needs to happen in agriculture, where is that training going to come in from?
I want to go back and focus on the budget, because since this is a budget special series here, let's talk about specifics that the government could be looking at or mulling. What about tax holidays for firms or companies that create upwards of 10,000 jobs? Big tax holidays for them, or generate more than 20,000 jobs. Do you think that's something in concrete terms, if something is announced as a tax holiday for them, do you think that could spur what we're looking for in the job creation?
Sure, why not? I mean,
Is it a feasible idea? Is it a feasible idea the government could actually look at and perhaps announce in this budget?
In fact, there are some interesting, ideas which are being discussed right now. So there are some policy measures being discussed in terms of saying that uniform payments to everyone, right? Which can spur the economy back into the growth path, right? A certain minimum payment which gets doled out to everyone. For the economy, like you said, do we focus on job creation by providing additional incentives, right? For organizations which actually get additional jobs or which give a certain job guarantee, may work, but there are a host of other things which are perhaps which the policy measure should focus on more for the longer term, right? So, for example, getting in more women into the workplace, getting in more labor into into the organized sector, right? Those are perhaps the longer term changes which the government should be aiming more for.
All right. At this point, I'd like to take a short break. When we come back, we'll discuss the budget wish list of our panel and what they wish the finance minister could perhaps focus on. We're calling that segment Dear Finance Minister. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Only on NewsX, always on.
This edition of the Pole Yatra, where we will be traveling through the Malwa region, the biggest and the most dominant region in Punjab, with 2/3 of the Assembly seats.
Welcome back. We're still discussing with our panel the biggest challenge that India is facing right now, and that is creating more jobs. Starting with you, Jayant, if I could, educational reform as a means to spur job creation. How important is that, and how much of the focus in this budget should be on that?
I think more than education, reforms in the skills space. We have this national skills qualification framework, which ensures that anybody boarding the skills bus, for him or her, there'll be vertical mobility options. A plumber could even go for a doctorate in plumbing if he wants. Similarly, anytime a person wants to move back to the mainstream education, should be able to do it seamlessly. So I think we have to operationalize the national skills qualification framework at a breathtaking speed. That's very, very important. Another very important thing is, we talk about the German dual system, which is a great skilling model for the entire world, especially in the manufacturing sector. The model which is closest to that system in our country is the apprenticeship system. A lot of reforms have happened in the recent time in that space. The new act has been enacted, and I think it's for the government and the industry to work together so that more and more people in the industry embrace it, because not just the couldn't be any substitute to skilling than actually being on the shop floor and soiling your hands and learning the hard way.
Fair enough. One bright spot that you see as far as this particular sector is concerned, and one big challenge that you see in 17-18.
As we were discussing and all, that data is still being collated and all. Yesterday we had the data that tractor sales have taken a massive dip in the last quarter. So that is a matter of concern, and the government will have to address the problems plaguing the agriculture sector as well as the problems that the middle class faces, especially in the wake of demonetization. So we can safely look at middle class and agriculture as the two trust areas for the government in the coming budget.
If I would just add something. So in the agriculture area, if you look at 51% of the country's population is dependent on agriculture and allied areas, contributing just about 17% of the GDP. This is a sector which is pulling the per capita income to a very, very low level. So people have to transition away from agriculture to other areas of economy for livelihood. That's very, very important.
All right, since we have limited time, starting with you, ending with you, your wish list for the finance minister. If he was here right now, what would be your top 3 be?
So 3 quick things. First, get in more diversity into the workforce. Put in place policy measures which encourages women to participate more and more, because you can't grow without 50% of your, of your population not participating in the workplace. Second, incentivize industry for creating jobs, right? And third, make sure that as government you have solid credentials put in place for different professions, right? Which would make the industry much more comfortable picking people from your respective credential organization. So schools and colleges particularly these days, industry has to invest significant amount of money to re-educate employees, so which is a huge cost. So put in place, good respected credentials across professions, which would enable and build that confidence in the education sector.
Fair enough. Nilanjan?
See, I think the government should focus on continuously recreating newer things. On the skilling sector, I think we had a great institution in the 70s called the ITIs. Great institution all across India. Government just should look at renewed investment in that and start getting quality teaching staff, and that covers a greater, far greater population than the engineering colleges. The next one is government should look at, reskilling people who are also experienced people, because skill life cycles are becoming shorter and shorter. When my dad started work and he retired with a same skill what he started his work with. Today in our lifetimes we'll probably have to reskill ourselves 3 or 4 times. I think that initiative is completely missing, and people are becoming redundant and inefficient there. The third one is, structural reforms in education, because when we talk of any kind of growth, where are the people going to come from? And unless our educational institutions are able to supply that manpower, we cannot talk of any growth, because if we don't just have the people there.
Fair enough. Before I end, I just want last quick question to you. As we've talked about demonetization, and many experts or analysts have predicted that there is a contraction. Do you see this in the short term inhibiting GDP growth, or do you see this as a blip on the radar which will go away?
Well, as we have said earlier also, that there is a short-term pain for long-term gain. A lot of people are saying that short-term, yes, we are hit. Yesterday, outlook was sort of brought down rather. So, but in the long term, I see bigger gains coming to India, even to Indian economy, and I see the GDP going up even to the extent of probably 9 to 10%.
All right, fair enough. We're out of time. Thank you so much for joining us, Nishit, Nilanjan, Jayant, and Suman. That's all the time we have. I've been Athar Khan. Goodbye.